story. Before we discuss what happened on 1777 at Valley Forge, we'll talk about what happened in 1776 when they're crossing the Delaware. That's where you see that famous picture that we were talking about. Slide 4, if you go to slide 4, the painting comes from Christmas in 1776. The months prior, the British had been pushing the Continental Army south out of New York. And after taking Fort Washington in November, the British continued to pursue the Americans across New Jersey. Let's see. They went to the Pennsylvania side with little food, ammo, or supplies. Washington knew that they would not last long sitting around and knew they needed to make a strong move. Washington decided to attack a Hessian garrison at Trenton. So the Battle of Trenton, that's another Battle of Trenton that we were just like, dude, we were winning and losing and winning and losing. If you heard of the Battle of Trenton, please look that up. They crossed the Delaware and marched 19 miles. Listen to that. During Christmas in the north, marched 19 miles.
Freezing storm.
Freezing, dude. A lot of them were underclothed and had little ammunition, okay? 19 miles toward Trenton in freezing storm. At Trenton, men were exhausted and unprepared. The American forces quickly swept them up and forced them to surrender. Knowing that he could never hold British reinforcements, Washington slipped back across the Delaware. On December 30th, he crossed again back into New Jersey. Knowing he was severely outnumbered, Washington urged militiamen whose terms had expired to stay on 6 more weeks. He basically talked them into staying on 6 more weeks. He grew his numbers from 2,000 to 5,000 in order to fight against 8,000 men.
Which one thing that I want to point out here is if you notice, Washington, even if inside he was struggling with the idea of hope, he kept going. Dude, because he had hope for his people, for his men. So you'll notice time and time again, it was Washington who was like, no, we got to go forward. No, we got to go. We got to do this. We can't just sit back. We can't be afraid. We got little ammo, little supplies, little protection. Go forward. Might as well.
That's right. Let's see. On New Year's, Washington's 5,000 faced off against 5,500. General Cornwallis and his British troops fell back at the end of the day, assuming they had trapped Washington. During the night, Washington had 500 men keep the campfires going and move the rest of his troops on a nighttime march north. So he's fooling them at this point. They marched without torches, even a muffled wagon wheels in heavy cloths. So they took the wagon wheels and they put heavy cloths around them because back in the day they had those wooden wheels. Those wooden wheels would hit the rocks and make all this noise. So they muffled. I mean, that's just genius, right? Yeah. On January 3rd, General Cornwallis woke up to find his enemy had disappeared. Washington's men were by then ending the 12-mile march to Princeton. They overpowered the British troops at Princeton and took prisoners, arms, and supplies. They withdrew to Morristown and established winter quarters. Listen to that. God gave them favor. Yep. They were able to withdraw. They were able to get the arms. They were able to put quarters up, some places where they could stay and sleep. Because, dude, dysentery was huge there. Malaria,
flu,
jaundice, the flu. Man, people losing limbs because of frostbite. All that stuff was happening. Now, back to 1777 at Valley Forge. It's probably one of my favorite stories. Washington and his troops arrived at Valley Forge a few days before Christmas and were ready to hunker down for the winter. They had lost a string of battles, which resulted with the British taking the Patriot capital of Philadelphia in the fall. And I'm going to continue with my own notes. Did you guys know that when they left Philadelphia, because it was a sign at the time, Philadelphia was kind of like the capital of America at that time. And it was a sign that if you took the capital of a nation, it was over. Like you took it. Washington actually took the Liberty Bell from Philadelphia so that they wouldn't melt it into musket balls. That's what they ended up doing. I mean, it's pretty amazing how that all happened.
I want you to think about that, because so often we, especially today, we tend not to put a whole lot of value in something like that, let alone risk life. So I'm reminded of in the Old Testament, David talks about how much he would love to drink water from a well in Jerusalem when Jerusalem was occupied.
Yeah,
his own men snuck through ranks in order to get water from that well. And then they brought it back to him. And most of you would think he would thank them profusely and he would take a sip and honor all of his men. No, he actually poured it out as an offering to the Lord. He said, I can't drink of this because of how sacred this is. So there's a value and a sense of sacredness over certain things because of what they represent. And I think it's beautiful that Washington so saw the Liberty Bell, something
so sacred,
something so sacred that he's like, no, we're going to take men, we're going to take wagons, we're going to do what we need to do to get this out. Because think about hauling a huge bell out of town when you're trying to escape.
With a bunch of dudes who were like tired and all that stuff.
Exhausted, starving.
Yeah,
like
that was not a small feat, man. I'll tell you what.
That's not something light to be taken. And the fact that you had faith in your men to not say, no, we're leaving the bell. Shut up, Washington. We're getting out of here. No, he had enough faith in his men to understand and respect the value of that symbol. And knowing that if that symbol gets taken, something, a part of us has gotten taken out. And actually, rabbit trail for a second.
Go for it.
This is why they want to tear down your statues and your monuments and change your names.
Thank you.
This is exactly why they want to do it. They won't tell you. They'll say, oh, it's racism, racism, racism. Well, guess what? Now, all of a sudden, they're taking down statues of Frederick Douglass, Abraham Lincoln. So it's not about the racism thing. Washington, Jefferson, right? It's not just about the racism thing. It's about tearing out the heart and soul of your heritage and the symbols and the heroes of your culture.